Thank you. I think that fits together quite a bit. Again, from this morning, but also set the scene for some of what we're going to talk about this afternoon. Do hit the team up if they're interested in that event from Women in BIM. And they often, they will have a whole series of other events as well. So if you can't make that date, there'll be some other things that are coming on the calendar. They do a fantastic job of bringing that community together. So, and there are sort of supporters for the event alongside the other sponsors and supporters and the exhibitors that are outside. Now our next speaker is, I'm really interested to understand what he's going to talk about. He's going to talk about 10D thinking, so just that idea of just being smarter. There's a few lessons learned in there. For someone who was in the audience this morning, I'm so glad that most of you are already still here. I understand some had to get back to their day jobs. But a reminder that the presentations from speakers that are comfortable with us sharing them will be made available to all attendees. And just an also, and I'll mention it again at the end of the day, is if you are keen to be involved in, we bring it to New Zealand, safety events, we'll bring it to the same event to New Zealand next year, and we'll be back here in 2027. If you are keen to be involved, as a sponsor or an exhibitor, do hit the team up, they're outside the registration desk. But here we go, we've got Shayne Whitehouse from UrbanTech, our sponsor for the event, to talk about 10D thinking.
Thank you, Janet. When I started this journey, it was 3D to 10D, and then 10D became XD. And why it became XD was that, as we know, things are just keep moving on, changing, and going forward. We heard this morning that the original genesis for an Olympic bid was a traffic jam. Now, I would argue that we would need to do all that we're going to be doing with digital twins and infrastructure, whether we had the Olympics or not. But also, there's a possibility that if we do this really well, in say 8 games times, we could be doing it again. We could be one of the 5 or 6 Olympic cities. Decisions we make today would be very different if we had that in mind. And so what we need to do is build a platform as a legacy item, and I'm going to take you through my views on this. Can you just, okay. So first thing is Brisbane. We can't copy Paris, we can't copy Tokyo, we can't copy London. We've got some unique challenges here. Paris had all the venues built, had huge infrastructure. It's in the middle of Europe. We are a first-time city. We are a small city. We're the most distributed games, and we're a long way from anywhere else. Paris had the ability that it increased revenue. We may not get that chance. We've also got the fact that this is a digital twin summit. The IOC have said by 2027 we should have a digital framework in place. State Development released an infrastructure report in 2022 that said Queensland was digital by default. Yet here we are. 1,999 days since we officially announced that we were going to bid for the games, and what have we got? We've got 2,585 days to the opening ceremony. So we need to change things. Could you go back one slide, sorry? Victoria Park. It was the Gabba until it wasn't. Where was the intelligent discussion? Where was the cross-river rail model that allowed us to walk through all this? So when it turns into a construction site, when it rains for 3 months and they can't start work for another 6 weeks till it dries out, when $7 billion becomes 8 or 9, what are we going to think? We haven't had this engagement. And when we talk about a $7.1 billion bid, Sydney in 2000 was $6.6 billion. The average spend on games is over $20 billion. From 2000 to now on summer games, they've all spent over 20 billion. It's an expensive traffic jam. Okay. So, we then look at where we are. We struggle to build big stuff on time, on budget. Our contracts are not what they want. We've heard today about how the contracts need to change. If you look at what's been put in over recent times between Anzac and Easter and the school holidays, we had construction sites that were quiet for a month. We're getting clash detection and reworks that are happening after things. So what we need to do is we need to look at how we get better outcomes. We've heard how today the outcome is going to be the most important thing. We're going to look at how we federate the entire governance across this thing. We're going to have to look at new contracts. NEC contracts were used in London. They're outcome based. They have clauses for digital twins, they have clauses for carbon reporting, and it gets everyone aligned. That is the way forward. But more importantly, what the legacy that we've talked about and as part of our bid is actually the digital platform. So if we look at who needs what when, if we start in design, we see that the requirements for that, for engagement with the public, with councils, with everyone there, they have different concerns and what they care about. When we move to construction, we have a different group, still using the data from design and looking at what they need. Then we get to operations, we suddenly see what's needed there. Then when we get past that into legacy, we then look and see, well, who needs that as well? So what we need underpinning this is what I'm calling XD thinking. Basically a platform that brings on the data. Think of it as Sunshine Coast meets BIM, meets GIS, and somebody else, and we bring it all together. And so when we move from that into legacy, we then have the opportunity to use it for every decision moving forward. We can bring in all the existing infrastructure. 80% of what's ever going to be built is already being built. We bring that in. For operations, where 75% of the cost is, we can bring that in. So what is XD thinking? Think of it as a Google Play Store. You've got all the different applications, but you have a single place where you can get them from. And everyone's digital twin is going to be different. Some people are wanting for research, others will be wanting for construction. But what we need to do is bring all these twins together and all the data together into a single platform. Now, when we look at what we do currently, we have 3D, that's geometry. We have 4D, that's time. Now, for the Olympics, time is fixed. We're not going to pull that lever. 5D is cost. We can pull that lever, and we will be swinging it like a one-armed bandit. Anytime there is a problem, ching ching. This is why these big projects go out. If you look at the Oxford University study on these projects, it's because time on Olympics is fixed, cost blows out. However, we've also been engaged in carbon reporting. So 6D's got to come in. And when you look at that, it's got to come in design. 7D is the operations, facilities management. Again, when you design it, you need to think about how you're going to operate it, because that's where most of the cost is. 8D was safety and risk. Well, you've got to have that in your design, you've got to have that in your construction, you've got to have that in your operation. 9D, lean construction, again, is a principle that you would bring in design. How do you actually do this? 10D, modular construction, is something that you'd have to embrace at the very beginning. Now, all these dimensions have all been used either in silos or some together, but most of the risk sits in the middle. And so when we look at design, construct, and then handover and operations, we actually have to encompass a lot more than just what it looks like and how much it costs. Once you get to that point, you start to say, well, what else would you add in? Now, for the Olympics, what does that really mean? Well, if you take design being 10% or roughly of that, if you're using digital thinking, you can save around $200 million on the design. That design's going to avoid clash detections and a number of things, and that in itself will save in construction. And then you have operations. So looking at that, you can save close to $1 billion. What I looked at was, how do we put together a pilot that starts this process quickly? But after today, I could probably just say, why don't we cross river rail the whole of southeast Queensland? But if you go back to the 100-day review, you go to the delivery plan, the word digital isn't even mentioned. And if you don't believe me, load them up into ChatGPT or load them up and do a search for the word. But the Departments of State Development had innovation and digital by default in 2022. So where are we? So what would a proof of concept really look like if we were to do this based on the outcome? We'd go to Townsville. There's a BIM model of Townsville already there. One Plan, the digital twin partner for the Olympics, provides the venue management software. We'd use that. Where's the gap? That's the low-hanging fruit. You could do that quite quickly. You would then go and find an old stadium from Stadiums Australia, maybe one that hasn't got a digital model at all or any shape and kind, and how do we get that up to standard? Stadiums Australia would then know what it is to get the venue management software in and be in a position where it's able to actually do this. So what we could do from that point is not only start in Townsville, but take Cross River Rail here and start to build that out. When I started on this journey, I thought the answer was that we put on beer and pizza and speed dating where everyone bought their digital tools and digital twins. I don't think we need to wait till LA 28 and adopting the 3+4, i.e. 3 years of planning, 4 years of doing. We have a stadium, we're not building it in 4 years. So we start now, and we start with basically the people in this room. They know what's needed. We've seen it today, clearly what's needed. But what we need is the state government to come on board with this. So what does XD thinking actually do? Well, you start to look at it and it says, well, it reduces the risk. You get real-time decisions. You can use AI to actually guide your decisions. Again, you can have predictive maintenance, but even in construction, there are tools such as if you do a change in quantities or anything like that, it can automatically do the uptake in the calculation. So imagine being on site, making a decision in a change request, not having to go back to the QS. You actually saw the bill of materials change at that time. You get collaboration across the project. Everyone's outcome based. And you have data that's connecting, not competing. We don't have silos. And that also allows stakeholders to be engaged early. We're going to go on an emotional roller coaster with these Olympics. Paris did the same thing. People hated it and then they loved it. But they'll be paying for it for the next 15 years. Let's see if they love it in another 10. So a digital twin essentially shows what's happening now. it's often project-centric or even possibly being industry-centric within it. I may have a construction one of the engineers may have their own version for MEP or something like that. But generally it's also time-bound, i.e. we finish the project, there's the digital twin, that's it. The platform is to use for what happens next, not only for what we're doing now. It will scale across things. So think of it in the same way that DNR has done GIS. Imagine if we now had the Cross River Rail and the Sunshine Coast model put together, owned by the state government. How much better decisions could we get made then? And that really for legacy outcomes, this is essential. You can have mini twins, but without a platform, you're going to lose the legacy. You're just going to have silos. But as I've said, digital by default is actually baked into the cake. That's what we're meant to be doing. But we're not doing it. So we need to change the thinking for all that we're doing, for all the tools, the technology, the policy statements. Until we start doing this for real, nothing changes. So how does this actually work? Who's got to be aligned? So if you look at, we've got the Olympic stakeholders, we've got all levels of government from council to state to federal, we've got all our delivery partners, the tier 1 contractors, etc. And then we've got the public. And they all provide information up, requirements, everything up to there, which then goes into the platform layer. That's where BIM, GIS, procurement, policy all live. And then that in turn gives you the outcomes that you want. So as we've talked about procurement, digital must be in there. Carbon must be in there. In the same way for outcomes, if we're looking at building an Olympic village, if we know that it's going to be used for social housing and it's got a 30-year life, we build it differently. We've got to start thinking more about the outcomes and then building this in. There could be an argument, well, we've got digital twins. We've got them, Helsinki's got them, Estonia's got one, Singapore's got one. They're not aligning delivery. They've taken what's there, they haven't got the governance framework around it, and they've got a lot of dashboards, but they're not getting that future decision making. So what we're looking about is outcome. So when you see that here, what we've got is we've got all our legacy outcomes. They in turn are driven by the backbone and by the stewardship that's shared at the bottom. We've got that from the Olympic Committee through to First Nations, councils, the public. But also what's behind this is not just a pillar of 3D to 10D technology and digital twins. There's two other pillars that are behind this. The first one is NEC contracts, outcome-based contracts. We can't build it with the current contracting framework. Can you imagine what enterprise bargains on the Olympics are going to look like? They will just go through the roof. When we have so much in the state competing, if you look at Townsville, Townsville's going to be competing with Brisbane. We can't do it this way. Otherwise, we're just going to send the state broke. We also have a data framework. This thing needs to be agnostic. Everyone will have their own choice of tools. All it needs is a framework to bring this in. You share the data, you have the thinking, you have the intent. I don't care what you use as long as you have a digital twin and you can put it in there, and when someone wants to do a research report on it, they can access it. So the legacy isn't in the bid, it's in the delivery, how we do it, what we do. But if we're waiting for alignment, we're still a long way behind. So I think we need to change the thinking. I think we need to change it now. We've had 2,000 days already. There's not much more than that to go. So we're nearly halfway, and we still don't know where the broadcasting centre's going or whether the stadium's staying where it is. So, for 2 months of games, we're going to deliver 2 generations of legacy, and we only get one shot at this. Thank you very much.
Some food for thought, mate. No, I'm glad a lot of people waiting for this. No, that was really good. I think sometimes the events, so you hear